to articulate the deepest appreciation that Cheryl, Cyril, and I and our families have for our very special cousin, Billy, his wife Nancy, to let him do all these things, and our interpreter and beautiful friend, Joe. To our dearest, most beloved Joe, you embody the hope and survival of the Jewish people. We and all who know you hold you in such high esteem. We are forever indebted to you for your gift of translation of our Mother Al-Sham's letters and the Shishuvitzer Yisker book Aleph. Please know that yours and Billy's dedication to these priceless endeavors will be felt for generations to come. God bless you. We are making a donation in your honor to a cause of your choice. So you can think about what cause, and then we want it to be specific. So Zevish Bilha, das is for Ayah, and this is for our cousin Billy. To our dear cousin Billy, you are one in a million. Your ceaseless dedication and generosity made it possible for us to learn and feel the stories of our family. We immensely appreciate your incredible work with Joe, and at the same time witnessing the heartfelt relationship it has fostered. We love you. You are a very special cousin. Love your cousins from all, Charlotte, Cyril, Barbara, and families, and Elisa Kiefer. I must put a shout out because she was involved more than us in making this happen. And we are making a donation to a cause of your choice in your honor. And these were designed by Isabel Goldfarb in the pink over there.
Really?
Oh,
wow.
Yes. And this is Joe's
For Isabel.
lovely, individualized art.
This does make Joe kind of a member of the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
With all our help. Okay, now we can proceed.
And you're not from Sislovich, you're not from Sislach, but you're
Where are you
in
from,
anyway.
though, Joe? Where are you from?
Lunch.
And you're not a Litvaker.
Are you from Lodz?
And you accept me to be one of your tribe.
They're one of the tribe, right?
Where is he?
Cheryl, let him tell us. He'll tell us.
Yeah. Let me just say before Joe starts that one of the things that we're trying to accomplish mostly today is to get this record of knowing that we lost family in the Lodz Ghetto. We know some of the names, we don't know all the names, we know some of it, all thanks to Joe. But the point is that it's important for future generations to know what happened to that part of the family, and what better person to tell us what happened in terms of how that ghetto was created, how people lived for those years in that ghetto, all those people including our family, and so that everybody remembers that yes, there was a Holocaust, it really did happen, people died. Our cousins, uncles, and aunts died in that ghetto and in the concentration camps. So it's thanks to people like Joe who are still willing to talk about what happened. And Joe, more than anyone, has spent hours and hours going to schools and talking with people and translating letters that have survived, particularly for this family, 40 or 50 of them for both the Kaplan side and the Lape side. Just a phenomenal thing. So Joe is going to talk about what happened, how there got to be a ghetto, what life was like in the ghetto, and then we can all ask questions when he's done. Here is Joe.
I don't know how good I am and explaining to you.
Could you speak louder?
Okay. It's, I don't know how much helpful I can be in explaining to you where the people disappeared from the ghetto, or in the ghetto. It's in 1940, the German organized a ghetto in Lodz, and they took the part of Lodz which was run down, it was the worst part of the city, and decided to put all the Jews in that part of the city and concentrate them in one place. From my studying the history of the Holocaust, it was by the Germans, it was planned to keep the Jews in one place. Whenever they wanted to do something, they know where they are. They don't have to go from city to city and collect the Jews for the final jury, but it was keeping it in one place so they can have them ready anytime they want to. And that's what happened. When we went into the ghetto was fenced off from the rest of the city. 2 streets where the streetcar used to go through that area, through that part of the city, the road was declared Aryan, that means Gentile, for the Gentiles. And the sidewalks from the ghetto were declared Jewish, part of the ghetto. The fence went on the curb of those streets, 2 streets. I recommend to you, you will have a good understanding of the ghetto location if you watch Europa, Europa. There is a movie, or Europe, Europe, Europa, Europa. It's an interesting movie from a boy who was born in Berlin, born Jewish, then he tries everything to survive. It's interesting. You will see the streetcars, and you will see the fence right on the curbs of the streets, and that was the ghetto. To walk from one part of the ghetto to another part of the ghetto, the Germans, of course with the Jewish workers, built walk bridges to walk over. You have to walk over them, on the bridge, and walk down to the next part of the ghetto. That's the way the ghetto was built. To begin with, in 1940, May 1, 1940, the ghetto was closed, shut, closed. Jews couldn't get out, Gentiles couldn't walk in there, it was all finished. The Jewish people in the ghetto tried to make a living, tried to buy bread, and there was nothing in the ghetto of volume, because it was the part of the city where 50% of that part of the city didn't have electrification yet, had pumps on the courtyard to fetch water, so it was hard. From toilets we didn't talk. Outhouses were not convenient for us. And in the ghetto at the beginning it was very hard. People had money, were buying from smugglers who smuggled in some food to the ghetto, and no road. People were running around, didn't know what to do. They tried to make a living, so we decided to go out and demonstrate. And the Jews demonstrated in 1940 on the streets of the ghetto, and the Germans had prepared a police corps and a fire corps for the ghetto before the ghetto was closed. So we had Jewish policemen, we had Jewish firemen, everything was Jewish in the ghetto. The administration was Jewish, and the Germans picked a leader, and the leader was Chaim Romkowski. If you had that name, I have no idea. But Chaim Romkowski was the chef of the ghetto. His fate was the same as anyone of the ghetto, anyone who perished, I mean. So that was the German picked a Jew who was living in the ghetto. Chaim Romkowski was, before the war, he was running an orphanage, a Jewish orphanage in a suburb of Lodz. And that's the really machas, the really people who were running the Jewish community before the war in Lodz, mostly were killed. Some of them were sent to concentration camp in 1939, at the end of the year, as soon as the Germans marched in. So the Germans liked that man best. Chaim Romkowski knew German language pretty good, and I wanted to tell you, and don't feel bad about it, he was a Litvak. Yeah.
We're gonna make you an honorary Litvaker.
He came to Lodz before the war, and he looked for work. Originally, he was an insurance agent in Lodz. But later on, he looked for a community job, so he got to run an orphanage, a Jewish orphanage in Lodz. That was his job. In the ghetto, he became the king of the ghetto. You know, there are songs written about him and mention him as the king.
What was his name again? What was his name again?
Chaim Rumkowski.
I,
Mordechai Chaim Rumkowski. If you want to have the full name, it's Mordechai Chaim Rumkowski. He was running the ghetto, and he was running it really the way he wanted to. And the police were, he had policemen, he has a lot, he took a lot underworld people, or what you say, gangsters, from before the war, Jewish gangsters, and then make them policemen and make them commanders, was paying good for him. I mean, he wanted to keep it in line. Anyway, as I said, so the Jews went out in the ghetto and demonstrated, and we asked for bread and work. The Koski sent out the Jewish policemen, and what the Jewish policemen had for weapons was just
Sticks, batons.
sticks,
Clubs,
baton. No guns, nothing. Anyway, they couldn't control it, and they couldn't handle it. Koski called up the Gestapo in Lodz, and they came in, and they killed a few Jewish people in the crowd with machine guns, and the demonstration was over. That was over. After that, anyway, there was a lot of going on between Rumkowski and the Gestapo SS and the German government to bring in food. The only way to bring in food, the Germans demanded, is that we start working, producing for them, you know, stuff. So that's what happened. They started to set up shops in the ghetto, all kinds of shops. You mentioned it, it was there. And I can tell you that wood electronic was already in the ghetto at that time, used. And there was light electricity, small electrical machinery. Everything was done in the ghetto, and the ghetto was really running by a German man, his name was Hermann Bieber. He was the agent from Berlin. He got the full power to do in the ghetto whatever fits him. Anyway, he was running the business with the Jewish administration, and they set up shops, and most of the people went to work. And for the work, instead of money, the Germans sent in food. Not enough to eat, not enough to be satisfied, but their rations were sent into the ghetto. Anyway, to buy the food, we have money.
Hi.
Valeria, have a seat. Sit down. Here, sit right here.
The Germans ordered at that time that all the Jewish people in the ghetto who had valuta is foreign currency, including German marks, have to come and hand it over. Otherwise they will be arrested, they will be tortured. Anyway, they took also away the German money which some people had. Everybody had a few marks, and they exchanged it for Jewish money, Jewish patrons, ghetto money, that's what we call it, ghetto money, which was only valuable within the ghetto. If you would happen to get besides the ghetto, outside the ghetto, you couldn't use it because nobody would take it. It was no value to it. I have in my possession a couple of notes. I bought it in 1996 when I was back to Poland. I saw somebody with a vendor and I bought it from him. So I have some proof. And it was ghetto money signed by Chaim Rumkowski.
He was no good.
He was the king of the ghetto. Anyway, in that way, it was two things. One thing is the Germans didn't want that we go to get out of the ghetto and buy, we go to smuggle. The Polish people, let's see, if we meet a Polish guy, he wouldn't take that money because there's no value to it, except in the ghetto. And that's the way the Germans took out all the valuable money from the ghetto. Besides, every woman has to come and cash have a ring for a few marks. Every valuable you have in your house, you have to hand it over. It was terrible. Even in 1940, as soon as the ghetto was created, people died of starvation. There was a typhoid fever epidemic in the ghetto, and I remember even when we started to work, when we came home from work, by Jewish law and Jewish tradition, if somebody dies, you don't leave him on the bed. You have to put him down on the floor. Why? I have no idea. I didn't study that much. Anyway, when we came home from work in 41, 42, the job was from the people who were still healthy and, I mean, had flesh on, to take the people from the neighbors and put them down on the floor. The next day came the, what do you call it, the hearse, and the undertaker, and took them all and brought it in the Jewish cemetery, which is still in existence.
So there's a Jewish cemetery in the
The
ghetto.
present cemetery is still the old cemetery, and all the ghetto people which died in the ghetto were buried there. Yeah.
In that ghetto.
In the
Buried
ghetto.
in the ghetto.
Yeah. The ghetto was so built that the back of the cemetery was facing the ghetto. The wall was facing the ghetto, so it opened the wall. So you had, you could walk from the ghetto into the Jewish cemetery. It was open the wall, put in a gate, and you know. So that was the daily chores. After work, you take care of very sick people and take care of the dead ones. Anyway, when the ghetto was closed, there were 120,000 or 140,000 Jews in the Lodz Ghetto. Before the war, in Lodz there were 200,000 Jews and a population of 700,000. 1/3 was Jews, 1/3 was Polish, and almost 1/3 or 4th was ethnic Germans in Lodz. There were a lot of Germans. They had a lot of industry, textile industry. Lodz was very famous of textile. They even called it the Polish Manchester, like British Manchester, where they produce a lot of textile. That was Lodz. Lodz was producing a lot of fabric. That was the ghetto. I worked in a metal shop, and that's what I did in the United States too afterwards, when I came to the United States. And people worked, my mother worked. What did she do? She made straw boots to put them on the military boots for the German army. After they attacked Russia, they needed warm boots, so they put straw. What is straw in English? I really don't know exactly.
Straw. It insulates.
Yeah, and they, you know, and they made boots to put them on their boots, on the leather boots, so they wouldn't freeze in the Russian winter. That went down around up to 41. The Germans didn't come into the ghetto to raid the ghetto or grab Jews from the streets like it was before the ghetto. The Germans used to raid the streets of Jews and put them on trucks and haul them away to work wherever they needed to work. But when the ghetto was closed, that stopped, which was good. We, in a way, were happy that we won't have the Germans running around in the ghetto and pick up Jews. What happened is the Germans came to the leader of the ghetto, to Rumkowski, and asked him, Mr. Rumkowski, we need tomorrow 200 people. We need for Friday, we need 500 people. So he would pick people to go out of the ghetto and work for the Germans, what they wanted to. Besides this, people were working in the ghetto all the time. And the people who worked in shops were not sent out, so he had always people. Another thing happened is those people who were picked to work didn't really want to go to work, but they were paid by Rumkowski, who got the money from very rich Jewish people who came into the ghetto too. Not all.
Did they have the money with them? I mean?
Some of them brought in money with them, right? What they did, what the rich Jews did, is they bought themselves out. Just said to the poor guy, we'll pay you, you go instead to work. So they were taken off the list. You have to have contacts, you have to have you have to have clout. Yeah, in English it's clout. You have to have clout in the government. So you wouldn't go to war, you could buy yourself out. Even at the worst time, you could buy yourself out. And that's what people did who had money. Anyway, I have to add something to it. If you know history, in 1941, the Germans were not satisfied with occupied Poland, occupied Belgium, France, Czechoslovakia, Austria. They were not satisfied. So they attacked Russia in 1941. After the Germans attacked Russia, that was the fate of, that was the end of the Jews. And I explain to you, which I know from history. In the beginning, the German policy against Jews was not to kill them, but to keep them in places where they can always decide what to do with them. And as you know, the Germans attacked Britain, bombed London, a lot of destruction, but they couldn't occupy Britain. We all know that. Britain was not occupied. After the Germans lost Britain, they decided to go on Russia. The policy was in Berlin that after they occupied Britain, Germans will have a lot of colonies in Africa. And then they will take every Jew and cleanse out Europe of Jews and send them all to Africa, to some Madagascar or Kenya or wherever, and they will get rid of all the Jews. That was the policy. But in 1941, when they attacked, when they couldn't occupy Britain and attacked Russia, at that time the Germans decided to kill every single Jew they find in Europe. That was the plan. And we are talking about Lodz, so I don't want to wander off from other places. I'm going to talk about Lodz. At the end of 1941, the Germans killed a lot in the Ukraine. You know, the Germans marched, the Russian resistance was negligible. So they marched into the Ukraine, and there were a lot of Jews living in the Ukraine. And you might have family who came from the Ukraine. And they started to kill the Jews just anywhere. They just took them out to ditches and put them in front of the ditches and shot them from behind, and they fell in, and then they covered them up. That was the first way of the mass murder, of the you know, of killing wholesale, so to say. In the Lodz Ghetto in 1940, at the end of 1941 and 1942, I would say about 60 miles north of Lodz, there was a city, Chelmno.
Yeah.
C-H-E-L-M-N-O. If you want to write, I see people taking notes, which is very good. It was the city of Chelmno. And Chelmno, they dug ditches for the Lodz Jews. And what they did is they took out in the beginning of 41 and 42, at the end of 41, winter 41 and then 42, they took vans and they took the Lord Jews. They said they're going to go to farmers, they're going to work. The Germans covered up everything as far as they could. And in the ghetto, we didn't know where they all went. So what they did is they put them in vans and piped in the gas and killed them on the way to the town Chelmno. In Chelmno, Poles and Jews were digging ditches and they were dumped there and covered up. That's what it is. Anyway, the ghetto started to get thinner and thinner. In 1942, 1 week before Rosh Hashanah, this is accurate. I have written down, I have dates too, but I cannot mention dates exactly because I have written down all those dates. The week before Rosh Hashanah, the Germans came into the ghetto and said to Koski, we need 20,000 Jews. And of course, the Germans always went with a lie. We don't have enough food for the ghetto people. We're going to send out 20,000. We're going to send the sick, the old, the children, the woman who can't work. All the people who are not able to work, we send them out, and there will be more food for the healthy ones who work in the shops. And they made a raid 1 week before Rosh Hashanah and went from house to house with Jewish policemen and German policemen and one lieutenant who knows who he was. And went from backyard. You must be familiar with the Polish buildings. In the front they have a big building, then they have a courtyard, and then they have some annexes in the back of the courtyard. Everybody has to step out from their home. I can tell you just about my family. My mother dressed up and tried to look alive, which a lot of people tried only to look alive because everybody was media, bone and skeletons, and you had to walk out, and if somebody was caught inside, it would be shot on the spot. We all walked out. I still had in 1942, the week before Rosh Hashanah, my mother was alive, my father was alive, I had 4 sisters and 1 brother. And as far as 42, we were really, people were jealous of us that we are still intact, my family was still intact. The reason we were still intact is because we worked in shops and we worked at home too. My father always came up with something, make something useful for the ghetto people, for the administration, like we made paper clips, you know, paper clips from wire. We made different things like measurements, cups of measurements, like you have here 1 ounce, 2 ounces, 3 ounces, for measurements for the cooperative, for the food stores, for the food distribution, to be able to measure food. So we always made something in the home. So we bought on the black market sometimes a little bit more potatoes, a few more slices of bread. So we made it better than others. Anyway, we had to get out from the house and stand in front of those German, with the Jewish policemen, German policemen, and went with our stick just right and left, right and left. And we didn't know what happened to these people, what's going to happen to us, our people. and they put them on trucks and hauled them away to gathering points, which was old hospitals, and kept them there over there. As soon as they had those vans coming, they load them up and hauled them away to kill them. And on the way they were dead. When they arrived there, they were dead and were taken out and were buried in ditches. That was 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. The Friday before Rosh Hashanah was a weekend in 1942, when the Germans closed the ghetto. I mean, again, they moved out from the ghetto. The ordinances or the orders were that the race was called off. They took the number of people, and the rest people would go Monday back to work. But also we didn't have food at home, and my father tried to keep the family still together. So I lost my brother and my mother. That way the first sacrifice of my family.
At the same time? The mother and when we took you outside?
My mother and my younger brother was taken away. So I still had 4 sisters and my father. So next Monday we went back to work. My father said life has to go on. We don't know what happened to them. And at that time the people in the ghetto believed they were taken out and they were sent to farms because there was not food enough. The Germans, they traveled around in the ghetto and with speeches that please understand that we have war and we don't have food enough to send into the ghetto. The people we will send out, we will send them to farmers. They will help out a little bit, they will get food. Nobody survived, nobody. They took out at that time around 20,000 Jews. And Rozenberg was begging the German authorities to stop it. He said the shops won't have enough people to work. But the Germans would start to turn out together. From 1942, as I said before, Rosh Hashanah, till the end of the ghetto, here and there, every few weeks they came in and took out a few thousand Jews. So the ghetto thinner and thinner and thinner. I'm going to jump to 1944. In 1944, we didn't know what happened to them. Some people even received postcards and saying we are fed well and we do our war and everything is okay. The Germans' propaganda machine worked really effective, and that's the way the Germans live. And to tell you the truth, exactly what happened to my parents and my sisters, I found out after the war, not during the war. After the war, I found out through people who survived. Kellner, which I mentioned, the first killing fields for the Lodz Jews. There was 1 or 2 Jews who survived. And there was also a Polish diplomat who visited those places, and he even, John Karski, he was even in America, and I don't know if he met Roosevelt or he got a message to Roosevelt what the Germans are doing to the Jews, but it was ignored. That man was really one of those Gentiles who really tried to help the Jews during the war. And his name is mentioned in Yad Vashem, just like any righteous Gentile who saved some Jews, or saved Jews. Anyway, the ghetto went on and on and on, and on. As I tell you, since 1942, when they started to send out Jews from the ghetto, it kept on. We didn't know when or what, but they came in and took out a couple thousand this week, and then they laid off people from work, and the ghetto got thinner and thinner. And we lasted that to 1944. In 1944, when the Germans started to lose the war. They started to lose the war in 43. But in 44, the Germans were already pushed back so much that the Russian army stood on the east side of Paris, which is only from Lodz about 90 or 100 miles, less than that. Anyway, when the Russians came and close to Warsaw, tried to occupy Warsaw, there was an uprising in Warsaw, besides the Ghetto uprising. Ghetto uprising, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising was April 1943. The Polish uprising in Warsaw, in the city, by the Gentiles, was in 1944. Okay. And so in 1944, the Germans decided to liquidate the Lodz Ghetto. And that was in July, August of 1944. Everyone had to register and appear for transportation. So you could hide yourself somewhere in a basement, but where would you eat? What would you eat? You could eat, there was no food to fetch anywhere in the ghetto if you were hiding. So 1944, at the same time of July, August, all the Jewish people from the ghetto, except for the Germans picked 900 healthy, strong men to stay in the ghetto and try to pull all the machines out of the factories, the shafts, load them up on railroad and be hauled away to Germany. But the rest of the Jews were all sent to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, I arrived with my father and my 4 sisters. It was August 1944. And of course we were cattle cars. In Auschwitz, we had the cattle cars, we had to get out of the cattle cars. And before we went in the ghetto on the railroad, we were told by the Germans to take everything we could carry with ourselves, to take it because they explained the Germans are bombed by the Allied forces and there's not much left there, but take it with you. Take it with you. And you will have a lot of use. Everybody was schlepping, carrying whatever they could. Little children were carrying knapsacks loaded up. Everybody was loaded up. And that's the way we came into Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, we were ordered to get out of the railroad car and put everything on the ground and walk away. And we were ordered men on one side, women and children, and little children, and sick and old people on the other side. And I was torn away from my father and from my sisters, and I was with strange people, Jewish people, I was strange one, I didn't know anyone.
How old were you?
I was 18 years old.
How old?
18.
18?
Yeah. When I left the ghetto, I was 18 years old. And I was by myself. I cannot, how can I explain what I felt? Torn away just like on an island. And I was marched off, and the other group of people, women, men, old men, old people, and children were marched off. In the group where I marched off, and I went to, they took us to a shower, we had water coming. But the people on the other side, which were marched off, instead of water, gas came in. Cyclone gas, and killed them. It took a few minutes and killed them. We know for a fact that all suffered very much, and everybody, when they opened the gas chamber and take the bodies to cremate them, we know that the nails were bloody and the fingers. I'd like to tell you, the Germans used as much as they can Jewish people to do the dirty job too. You know, so we know from Jewish people who walked with the bodies, they were scratched, some of them were bleeding from their heads, went up in the gas chambers and hauled them away to the crematorium. And the crematorium is still there. I was there in '96 and I couldn't go, but my children went. And so I was wonderful thing. Yeah, in Auschwitz. I'm pointing because that lady is going to Poland.
In August, I'm going to go to.
It's going to be a little hot, like here.
Do you have the tattoo number in your arm?
Okay, that's a good question. I think I'm going to stop here. Let me finish my life.
Right.
It's going to be finished in a few minutes. Anyway, in Auschwitz I was separated. I was with all the Jewish men, and they put us in barracks. In the barracks, if you will see the barracks, the chimneys are still running in the length of the barrack, like this, made of brick. And in the barracks, the Germans came in, or their collaborators, were running back and forth, and said, we know you have diamonds, and you have gold, and you have valuables, and you have foreign currency. Give us all that. If not, remember, we will look in all the orifices of your body. We will look in anyway. We will find you what you have hid. And people, some people were scared and took out whatever they could and put it down. And some people took a chance and got through with it. Anyway, in Auschwitz, I was staying there about close to 3 weeks, something between 2 and 3 weeks, I don't remember exactly. And we were sleeping on the concrete floor of that barrack. And we were sleeping just like sardines in a can. You had to lay on the side because there was not a room to spread your back out. So we were sleeping like this on the concrete floor. In the morning we were chased out of the barracks and we were standing to each other between each barrack so you can warm up, you know. And I don't want to use the language, but the Germans used dirty language around them. And I cannot say the words I would like to say. And I probably would say it to a certain group, but I'm not going to say it. The Germans said, anyway, we slept on that concrete floor. We got every day a soup in Auschwitz, and we had to wait. There were 700-800 people in one barrack, men in one barrack, and they brought a big container with soup, and they gave us soup, and we had to wait for a dish. There were no dishes, there were cans. So we have to wait in line until somebody gets down so we get the can. And a spoon, who had a spoon? So, you know, it was hard. Anyway, it was good to get the soup. The luck was you get the soup sooner than later, because sometimes at the end there was no soup left for the less people. That's the way it was Auschwitz. Every day, or every second day, some secretary came with a little table, a portable table, came between the barracks, put it down, sat down on a chair, and said everybody who wants to go to work should stand in line. Many times I stood in line, and when I arrived at the table, he asked me, what did you do? Of course, whatever came to my mind, I said, I'm a machinist, I'm a sheet metal man, whatever. I can weld, I can do this and that. But sometimes they looked at me and you can imagine, I was still small, I was smaller than I am now. Anyway, I looked like a little boy. And sometimes they give me a kick, a real kick with their boots, and they kick me out of the line. once I was lucky and they signed me up, and we had to go to another shower, and at that time they gave us those striped clothes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way I was sent into Germany, close to Hanover, in a concentration camp, and there I was every morning, we went to work. About the numbers. Everybody was numbered. Every single prisoner was numbered. The only thing is, my headquarters where I was sent did not belong to Auschwitz. All people, the Germans had a system, and systems, they are very good in it. The system was they had a headquarters, and then they have branches of little camps. So if you look up concentration camps, you will find a list of couple thousand or 3,000. Every big camp had branches. So Auschwitz, all people who walked around Auschwitz, or were sent out from Auschwitz to work, had tattooed numbers. All the people who went to all the headquarter camps didn't have tattooed numbers. We have a number here and a number here on the pants. So, you want to know my number? 32272. And it is, and my camp belonged to a headquarters by Hamburg. I'm giving you a name, would you know it? Neuengamme. A big concentration camp. Not with gas chambers, but nevertheless similar to our headquarters. And we were like Dachau was a headquarters, you heard about Dachau. Rozenberg was a headquarters. So I belonged to Neuengamme by Hamburg. So I was sent to Hanover. In Hanover, same thing, we got off the train. And I must say, there are still some humanity in people. I remember on the trip from Auschwitz to Hanover, which took about 3 days and 3 nights, we stopped on some railroad stations and they opened the gate because it was very hot inside, it was the summer. And we were thirsty. You know, the water they gave us on a barrel of water was gone already. And you have to understand, we used the barrel for something else. And that was the bathroom and the cattle cars. Anyway, some stations, the Germans the assessments slided up in the cattle cars, and civilian Germans brought water to us. And they didn't stop it. The assessment didn't stop it. So here I will explain something. If somebody tells you that the Germans didn't have a choice, that they couldn't help the Jews, is a lie.
They could.
No one who helped a Jew escape got the death sentence by the German authorities under Hitler. They all went, he could have gone to a concentration camp and be treated as a German. But if a German brought a piece of bread for me and he was caught, he didn't even get a slap over the wrist. And he was not punished for little things like that. They're very careful not to do it. So I want to tell you that if you hear that a German helped somebody and he took a chance, not so much. He would not get the death sentence. He probably would wind up in a jail or maybe some hard labor if he did a bigger thing, but most of the German who helped Jews did not get punished. So, in Germany I was assigned to begin with to maintenance crew in a rubber factory which is still in existence, Continental Rubber Factory in Hanover, Germany. And there I stayed 3 months and we worked, and it was too good for us, I must say, for the Germans to allow us to stay there. And then they marched us off and we put in another concentration camp, which is Ahlem, A-H-L-E-M. And I met a man here in Sioux City, Iowa, who was liberating us in 1945, April 10, 1945, I was liberated in the camp. But we worked at that time when we were taken away from the rubber factory. We worked in our mine building a factory underground to make it bomb safe. I think for the liberation I learned my story, and I'll let you talk and ask questions as much as you want, and I'll try to answer them as much as I know. Okay. Anybody?
Yeah, what was the role of the natives, like the Lithuanians and the people?
Poland.
Poland.
How did the Poles respond?
I have to tell you the truth. In the beginning, as I said before, there was a lot of ethnic Germans living in Lodz, and Polish people, Polish Catholics. The Polish Catholics behaved to us like the Germans behaved to us, in a way. I'll explain to you. My father bought my mother a present a year before the war broke out. A new stove, a brand new stove, which was a little luxury at that time. When the Germans ordered the Jews to move to the ghetto, everybody took to the ghetto whatever they could, because the ghetto, as I explained, was the poverty-stricken part of Lodz, where electricity wasn't available to 50% of the area, and water was not available except a pump outside. So my father decided to take that stove to the ghetto. When we took that stove down the stairs on a sled, my father built a sled. It was in the winter, 1940, the end of the years, 40, 41, in the winter. When he took it down, we went to the gate, and you're not familiar with Polish courtyards. In the front there's a building, then there's a gate in that building to be able to drive in with a carriage, or you would be able to walk in or carry in something. It's pretty wide open. But there is also a gate. Before the war, in peacetime, at 11 o'clock, the gate was locked. So if somebody comes after 11 o'clock, has to ring a bell to the caretaker. And the caretaker used to come out and unlock the gate and let you in. You have to pay him a tip. That was the life of the caretaker. The same caretaker, who was only one Polish family in the whole building, and the rest of them were all Jewish people. It was a Jewish area. When we went to take out that stove, he put the gate on a chain that much open, and we couldn't get it through. I had one sister of mine, not my oldest, but the next to my oldest sister, Bluma was her name, Bluma in Yiddish, Flo. And she went to the German gendarme station, police station. And she said, my family wants to go to the ghetto. Your Yiddish is a little bit German, and she's pretty good. If you couldn't read the Yiddish newspaper during the war, we read the German newspaper, if you could get ahead now. Anyway, she went to the police station and said, we wanted to go to the ghetto, but the caretaker doesn't let us take out the stove. And he openly said to us, I want the stove. And my sister said, we'll see. So she went to our German police station. A German policeman came with my sister, I can see it before my eyes, and said to the caretaker, open it right now. And he opened the gate and we took out the stove.
Pretty gutsy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So this is a story about Polish people. The German people did better. The German people and the Jewish people before the war were like this, like brothers and sisters before the war. When the war broke out, the Germans marched in, and 8 days after the war broke out, the Germans marched in Lodz. The same German neighbor who was so friendly and so good walked into the Jewish family and said, I want this sofa, I want this closet, I want this and that and that. And the Jewish family said, take it. He had no choice. Otherwise he would bring some assessment and take it anyway. So that was the German neighbors and the Polish neighbors. I'm sure there were some, not I'm sure, I know, that there were Polish people who say Jewish people. They were good. But very few, very few. And there are so few, their names are mentioned in the Hashem, and they are mentioned everywhere, and sources are written about them, and things, and I think that. Any questions?
Joe, there was, we all know there was an uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto where the
Yeah.
Jews fought with the Germans, but that did not happen at Lodz.
No, the reason it didn't happen large is just the possibility of it. And I'll tell you, you have to have something, and you cannot throw a stone. It's not Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. You pick up stones and you fight with stones. You have Germans with machine guns and artillery, and you have to have where to hide. Lodz was my lifetime, when I lived there, was never, how do you say, canals. There was no sewers, that's what I wanted to say. Lodz did not have running water in the whole city. It was part of the city had running water. Most of the city did not have running water like we have here. So they didn't have sewers yet in Lodz. There was no toilets in all the buildings. So in Warsaw they had sewers. So the people, the Jewish people, were hiding in the sewers and fighting from the sewers.
Thank you, Steve.
Not too cold.
Dorothy, oh, do you want just a plain glass of
Just
water?
plain
That's a good
water.
idea. Would you like just plain water? Room temperature
Yeah,
water?
yeah, plain water.
Were the people in the Lodz Ghetto, were they always from Lodz?
So that's why Warsaw had possibility. Also, the Warsaw Ghetto was not hermetically sealed like the Lodz Ghetto. For instance, Warsaw Ghetto were still using Polish zlotys, Polish money, and they didn't have their own money, the ghetto marks. The Lodz Ghetto people couldn't contact outside people because they didn't have any money. The ghetto money was not of any value outside the barbed wires. Thank you.
Do the people, are most of the people in the Lodz Ghetto from Lodz? Do people come from other places there? Did they bring people from other locations?
In Lodz Ghetto? Yeah. From all the little towns. Before the school, when I lost my mother, before I lost my mother, the Germans cleaned up all the little towns, shtetls around, hundreds of them, and did the same thing. Women and children and sick and older people, they sent them to the church, to the town church, gathered them there, and took the people they picked to work, and sent them into the Lodz Ghetto to replace people from the Lodz Ghetto who died, who disappeared, sent them out. And there were selections in the shtetl, all over. And they picked young, healthy people, according to their view, and sent them to the Lodz Ghetto to work, and the older people, and women and children. From the church, they sent them away to the same place, Kelmer, another place, to be killed.
When and how did you learn what really happened after the war?
In Auschwitz, when I was picked with other people to stay in the barracks for the present time, before I was sent down to Germany, I learned that in Auschwitz, the couples. You know what a couple is? A couple is a combination of two words. Kamerad is kamerad, and police, kapo, kamerad police. It's a combination of two words. That means he's the same as I, but he's the policeman.
He's Jewish.
Okay. And those couples worked for the Germans and for themselves, of course. So we had Jewish couples, we had Polish couples, German couples. For example, in Germany, when I was in Germany in the camp, the couples and the leaders in the camp were German criminal prisoners from prisons, taken and sent them to the concentration camp to run the concentration camp. So I remember there was one who was from Mali, you know, had lifetime sentence. He was running the camp inside. So that's the way
Did those Jews have a choice? I mean, if they didn't want to do it, would they be killed? The Jews who became couples, did they have a choice?
Did they have a choice?
I mean, did they have to do what they told them to do, or they killed? Or did they?
No, they want to live.
Right, but I'm saying,
So
or they had it better than the other people?
better than elder prisoners.
Right.
There were two couples and a block, and there was a block eldest, that would be the eldest of the block. Not the eldest by age, but the chief of the block in the barrack was a German.
Mm-hmm.
I must say that now looking back, I'm happy that we had German couples, German leaders in the camp than Jewish leaders.
So did they snitch on the Jews?
Revenge after the war.
Did those couples snitch on the Jews? Did they kind of like,
Snitch.
what would you call it?
Tell on you.
Yeah.
Like tattletale. Tattletale.
Report. I think the question is the Jewish
No, because I have
are worse than a
I remember that years ago, I was
Isn't that
growing
it?
up, there was a man, and everybody, the whole community said that's what he was there. And they had nothing to do with this man. The man lived and died almost by himself, and nobody had anything to do with this man. Because that's what they said he was there.
Maybe
That's why I'm wondering if they had a choice to be like that.
some have a choice and some don't. Some of them
And how they knew it, I don't know. These people,
Some
that's
of
what they said.
took it because that was their livelihood. They thought they
To
were
keep-
not
but they
conscious.
would- they would-
They were conscious. Some of them bought themselves to be a couple.
Really?
That far. Yeah. They bought themselves a piece of gold or something. Yeah, bought themselves this position. And some of them were forced. It depends on the camp. Depends on the camp. Not every camp the same. There was a variation. Within the camp there were not too many rules.
So how did you find out about your family?
About my family?
Yeah, what happened to you?
But just by listening to witness what happened to the people who came there in that place.
You heard about it.
Like in the camp, when you were in a camp, people came and
The people from Calendar knew my parents? No. No. They knew the people who were there.
But you meet
killed?
people.
No.
Right.
Joe, do you still have the number?
I answered
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Only Auschwitz tattooed people who were working in all camps who belonged to Auschwitz. Like there was a munition factory close to Auschwitz, there was a Buna works, and there was coal mines around Auschwitz. The people who worked there were numbered, but the people who were sent farther were not numbered. People who worked in the coal mines, for example, were numbered and belonged to the headquarters of Auschwitz. They were sent later on to Germany, into Germany when the Russians came closer. That's possible. But the northern camps within Germany, we had numbers shown on here, and triangles, two triangles, which made them all David. But we didn't have tattoos. No.
Was Auschwitz the only place where they
Yeah.
have numbers?
Yeah, tattooed on the arms.
That's
was
it,
Auschwitz
not no
and-
other camp, even
No.
in Poland?
No.
Wow.
No,
Can I
no,
ask you how you escaped and how the miracle that you are here today? What happens that you escape? How did you escape?
How I was saved.
how did you
Yeah.
get liberated?
I'm liberated. Tell us the story.
How'd you feel?
How I got liberated.
I'm sorry, stop someone.
Well, I'll use dates. If you want to write down, write down. April 4th. No, April 6th. I think it was Friday. Yeah, April 6th. The German Gestapo and assessment had a barrack outside the camp. Similar to the camp, but there were rooms. It was not a big hall like a barrack, like a barn, but it was like a house. They lived there, and they were running the camp from the outside, like tower guards, little towers, and they were coming in. They had the really power over the camp, but the Germans, capos, and the ordnance within the camp had in the corner of the barrack made a room, walls with a door. The reason is they didn't want to mix with us, with the regular prisoners, is we had mice
Oh, yeah.
all over our bodies and all over our clothes. And God knows what kind of other around inside them. And we're still trying to be away, farther away. You couldn't even come sometimes close to that person and talk, because he would come close to you. And that happened. So they had the corner, and some of them did kill other people for their own goods. And we know, when we came to Auschwitz, everyone who was strong, or could organize a group, could go over and pick out a Jewish policeman from the ghetto and kill him. And the Germans didn't care. They hold him away. They just attacked him and killed him. And we know from Israel that some capos, some war criminals, Jewish war criminals, I'm not talking now about the German war criminals. German war criminals were plenty, but Jewish war criminals, the few ones, some of them were killed in Israel. After they came to
By
Israel.
other people.
I don't know if a lot. The numbers, I don't know the numbers.
Joe? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. You keep talking.
No, I mean about liberation.
But how did you know on the day of, when you got liberated? How did you know that that there was something going on and maybe something was changing?
We bodily noticed that. We physically met an American. We physically met somebody who talked Yiddish from New York. We physically got bad and physically they took us in vans.
The American soldiers.
Yeah, but,
Us to a hospital.
yeah, no, but before that, when you knew that there was something maybe that was changing,
We knew that the front comes near. Why? Because we could hear cannon salvo, I don't know the English expression, thundering. There was noise. I mean, we heard
the bombing and
bombing.
tank.
Bombing we experience all the time being in a
But
house.
the tanks.
Since the first minute we arrived from Auschwitz, we experienced bombing.
Were you in Auschwitz or were you back in Germany at that time?
I was liberated in Germany.
In Germany, right.
In a suburb of Hanover. The name is Aalen. Aalen concentration camp.
Yes.
That is the history. In the,
Uh-huh.
Anyway, it was Friday before liberation. As I said, April 6th, a German doctor and a Jewish doctor. He was even from Lodz. His name was Margolis, which is Margolis. I remember that because that was his name. And he survived the war and became hospital chief of a hospital in Hanover after the war. So they walked around, and whoever could not walk, they put them on a list to stay in the camp, not to go on a march. But the Germans did with the camps, all the camps in Germany. The Russians came here, they took the prisoners from the camp and marched them off to the west. The Americans came from the west, they took the prisoners from camps from the west and marched them off to the east. Little by little, that's the way they always walked. They always had time to march off the prisoners. Anyway, I was one of those people who could not walk. I walk a lot better and faster now at my 86 years old than I did then, when I was 19 years old. I could not walk, and I was on the list not to go on the march, and I stayed in camp.
Lucky you.
That's not the end of it. The next day, that was Friday, the Germans marched off with the people, with the Jewish prisoners, not only Jews, there were a few Poles, there were a few Danish prisoners there too, and Russians, a lot of Russian prisoners. They marched off the people west. I know now they were going in the direction of Bergen-Belsen. That was the gathering point. And I was not in that march. The Germans marched off. We didn't see a German anymore, and they left open the gate of the camp. We were afraid to get out. Maybe the neighbors will shoot us. They will be scared of us. So we stayed in camp. The first thing is food, something to eat, water. We went to the kitchen, whoever could. I was behind. But whoever could went into the kitchen and opened whatever was there. Was some bread left, there's some syrup, I remember. Everybody was gooey, and you know, and was water in the kitchen, a barrel of water. We had to hold water for the kitchen to cook soup every day. So we looted the kitchen, and everybody who could had a piece of bread. I had a friend who had a piece of bread. He had mercy on me, gave me a few crumbs, which I was happy. But I could not walk to the kitchen, and I was behind. Anyway, that was Friday. Friday evening, civilian German people with Red Cross armbands came into the camp and brought in some crackers and some candy. Some of us took it and ate it, and some of us were afraid it might be poison, you know, we had suspicion we didn't eat it. Anyway, it was not poison, it was food, they brought in food. And we were scared. The next day was Saturday. I was lying on my bunk bed, and German assessment came with a truck and loaded up the truck with the few people who were left on the bunk beds and went away. I was pulled down too, and they kicked me out from the barrack. And while I was out, I had another friend who pulled me and said, let's hide here. So we hid behind the barrack, and when the truck pulled away and went away, we came out. That was Sunday. Monday, we were hiding in the bushes around the barracks, and Monday evening we went to the mine where we worked, and we hid there. In the morning, I was with another friend, and we decided to crawl out and see what's going on. And we crawled out and went closer to the highway, and there was tanks coming, but they didn't have swastikas. Didn't have the German sign, they had a star, the American star, and there were Americans. There were Americans.
You say
I met one soldier from Suicide Iowa who took pictures at liberation. In one picture, in one of the pictures, I am there too.
do you have the picture?
Movies, he's got two
It's on
movies.
the internet.
Oh my God!
He's
We
in
need
two
to see
movies.
this movies.
In
Those
one of
movies.
the pictures, I'm there too.
Oh, okay. In the picture, or no, when the German civilians came in to give you like crackers and a little bit of whatever, you know, were they shocked or they knew what was going on already and they just felt like,
You won't meet a German who knew what's going on. Every German, even next door German, would say, we have nichts gewusst. We didn't know that.
do you
We
thought
know what's
they,
going on.
I don't believe it.
Oh,
I think they-
every German will tell you that expression. We have
How could they not know?
Joe, in the time that you were working in Hamburg until you were liberated, something kept you going. How did you stay alive all that
How
time?
did I stay alive? You are right about it. We got in the morning 17 people. We got one loaf of bread, which is 1.5 pounds maybe. 17 people. Then we got some tea, which was, I don't know what it was. In the ghetto we used to pick that from the outside. We used to pick that and make tea. It has a little flour in it. I think here they sell it for money in the United States. It was some kind of tea they gave us, and that was before we went to work. At work, when we worked in the factory in Hanover, rubber factory, Continental Rubber Factory, they bought us, from the camp they bought us soup around noontime. And when we came home, we got another soup or maybe a boiled potato, you know, in with the pea. So we got a potato, maybe 2 potatoes once in a while. Sometimes nothing. How I survived, I was very lucky. As long as I worked in the factory, in German, Meister, it's the boss of the maintenance crew, was a human being, a mensch. As we say in Yiddish, a mensch means one who has feelings. And he brought a piece of bread, a slice of bread. I worked with another inmate, a Jewish boy my age, and I knew him from the ghetto. It happens. And we were very happy together, and we shared everything. So the German foreman, called foreman, brought us a piece, one slice of bread. So we cut it in half and we shared it. And once he noticed that, he asked, what do you do? I was in German, I was Heinrich, from Herschel. Heinrich. Heinrich, the foreman, the German foreman, the civilian man said, what are you doing? I said, we share. We are good, close friends, and we share everything. He said, next day he bought 3 slices of bread. The German says, I put it on each slice. But there is tap inside, like a sandwich. Yeah. So he bought 3 slices. The middle slice was cut in half. He said, I'll bring you next day he brought us, so we wouldn't share. So for me, for him. Yeah, that helped. Anything, any little thing helped. I was one of those little guys who was scared to get hit. I did everything not to get hit. I would starve. Some guys went over and picked up a few potatoes, raw potatoes, anything. Whatever they found, beet, anything would. Chances by the railroad or on the trucks, they went down and picked it up. I was, how do you say in English? Chicken.
Chicken.
I was a chicken. I always never took a chicken. Never.
Oh,
you didn't want to get hurt?
I still am.
oh.
My wife is so straight.
Kept you alive though.
Yeah, personally. So I didn't get hit. So sadly that didn't come to me. But I was very decimated, very skinny, and I couldn't walk at the end of the day. So I'm telling you, the Germans decided that I'm not able to walk on the march. And I'd like to tell you, I found out about the people on the march. There were people in that march to Bergen-Belsen who could not keep up. And they were shot anywhere on the world. A lot of people, a lot of prisoners were shot on the spot. So, it makes me feel good I didn't join, I didn't walk.
I was just wondering if you feel comfortable answering this. If you could say one thing to like a German soldier or like Hitler, Adolf Hitler, what would you say? I'm just saying.
If I would see them, I would say, first thing probably I would say he could stand trial for war crimes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. If I would be a very strong man, I probably would give him
Punch him.
Yeah, probably I would give him a,
Yeah.
if I would be stronger than him, probably I would over
You should torture him
Maybe.
slowly. I would not punch him, or I would hurt him slowly. For him to suffer a little bit at a time.
You know what
You're
else
right,
I always
Maria.
think,
You're
Joe,
right.
is when we saw your movie, you know, Joe has this magnificent movie called Harbor of Hope. It's phenomenal.
wonderful.
Award-winning
It's
movie.
wonderful.
Harbor of Hope. He's being flown to San Francisco next month to premiere as one of the top shows.
Is that on video yet? Remember the director
Is it on the
said it's going to be
computer?
on video?
Say it again?
Harbor of Hope, is it on the computer?
I don't think so. Harbor
They
of
said
Hope
they're
got
going
on
to, didn't they say they were going to sell
YouTube or
video?
anything. There's an advertisement.
Advertising, yeah.
where is after the war.
After the war,
You will
right.
see healthy people there, pretty good fat, and this is after the war. I came to Sweden at the end of July 1945. I was kicked out of the hospital after being a month. I recuperated so well, I could run out anybody.
Wow.
Yeah. And I looked pretty
You look good.
decent.
And you went to Sweden? Did you ever? Yeah, yes. Interesting, you went to Sweden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why Sweden?
Why Sweden?
You went with your sister.
Yes.
I mentioned a word and there's a whole story behind it.
Right.
What did you say in Canada?
Sweden.
When I recuperated and they let me go from the hospital, and I lived in Hanover in an old Jewish nursing home which belonged to Jews before Hitler came to power, and they gave it back to the people who survived the camp to live there. I lived there, we had the German women who cooked for us and clothes for us. And then when I felt good, I thought, what am I sitting on my tush? Let's do something. So I thought from 4 sisters, I came to Auschwitz, I hope once at least find somebody of my 4 sisters. So I traveled around Germany where I heard there are women camps. So I went to Bergen-Belsen, not the Bergen-Belsen from the war, but the Bergen-Belsen after the war. You know, Bergen-Belsen, the concentration camp was burned down by the British because it was typhoid fever, lice and bugs and everything. They just burned it down. And they took the prisoners, the Jewish prisoners, and they put them in the SS houses where the SS lived. It was a whole, how do you say?
Like a nursing home?
A lot of SS homes, little tiny buildings for the SS. They were the Jewish people were placed after the war. Anyway, so I went to Bergen-Belsen. I hitchhiked a British truck, a British military truck. I went to Bergen-Belsen. There were a lot of women in Bergen-Belsen. And I tried to look in the faces. There was no office, there was nothing organized. Where people everywhere, women and men everywhere. And they had a lot of them had made fires, bonfires outside to cook something. Took a few breaks and made fires and cooked something. Anyway, I went around looking faces, and there were thousands of people. Where would you find your sister looking faces? And I went home to Hanover, back to Hanover to my friends, nothing. A few weeks later, I did it again. Before that, I went to Limburg. It's a town close to the Dutch border. I heard a lot of women when they have a camp of women. So I went there, nothing. So I went back to Hanover and then I hitchhiked again after a few weeks to Bergen-Belsen. And then there was a man, I forgot his first name, but his son was a big Holocaust organizer in the United States. His name was Rozenberg. And he started to, for pieces of paper, whatever he could find, he started to put down names. And I told him, I gave him a list of names, my sisters, whatever I had, and my brother. I still wasn't sure that my mother is dead, and my brother is dead, nothing. I didn't find out the details yet. And he said, why don't you take a look in that building? Every little building had a number, S55, B53. Anyway, I went to that building, I went up to the second floor, and I knocked on the door, and the way women, so I wouldn't walk in, just walk in. I opened the door, and my sister's right on the bed.
No way.
I didn't recognize her. She was
That's like
shaved,
a miracle.
didn't have hair because of the typhoid fever. A lot of women were cut short. And there she was, and she was sewing. It was 100% my sister. She was a seamstress. And she was sewing, taking blankets and making skirts for the friends around. And I said, you're not going to work after the war. Well, I took it away and I said to the rest of the women in that room, I said, sorry, she's not going to do it anymore. And I said, and I asked her, what are you missing? What would you like to eat? She said, I didn't have an egg since the war started. So I had friends who were on that march to Bergen-Belsen. I walked up to them, they were in Bergen-Belsen, and I saw a little bag hanging on the wall with eggs. I took those eggs and went out, whoever had a fire, and put them in a pot and boiled them, and brought it up to my sister. Anyway, I have to finish that story. So, how I got to Sweden. So, that was it. I wanted to take my sister to Hanover. In Hanover, I had ready for her a hospital which was beautiful, gorgeous in the woods. It was out of this world. So how did you get to Hanover? I'm not going to take you hitchhiking. Anyway, we went to the railroad station in Celle, which is the closest railroad station to Bergen-Belsen. And I went to the railroad station and I asked whoever was there, some, what do you call it, some clerk. I asked, when is the train going to Hanover? He said, we don't have a train going to Hanover. But that engine is going to Hanover. One engine is going to Hanover. And he said, if you climb up on the coal, on top of it, with you sister, you can go.
Oh, wow.
So we climbed up on the coal, and we went, the engine went back and forth, it took almost a whole day, and we arrived in Hanover. On the way, a thunderstorm happened, and it started to pour. And my sister got wet. And there was a German woman sitting with an impregnated raincoat, which is rubberized. Raincoat, they have raincoats, the Germans. And she took it off and covered up my sister. And I think covered up my sister. And we arrived in Hanover. And I took my sister to that hospital. I was recuperating. And she stayed there. I lived in the nursing home, and she stayed there. And then once I came to visit my sister, the Swedish Red Cross came and said, all you British prisoners and now liberated, you wanted to go to Sweden, we'll take care of your life, you give you clothes, sanitary conditions, everything. I said, Esther, where are we staying here? Let's go. We went on the van. I remember Esther, what's wrong with you? I looked very good at that time. A little healthy boy. I said, I have TB. And my wife.
Is she still alive?
No, she died.
No, my wife
Oh.
died
Is that your oldest sister?
It would be nice if she was here to see
Yeah.
She was 15, I was 19.
No way. A kid.
Oh, yeah.
A little kid. My daughter's age.
Right, I mean, what they went through. But you know, Joe, what always amazes me, and it goes with a person's constitution, but I always marvel at, you know, you see a lot of people who are survivors from horrors of the Holocaust, as you experienced, and somehow you have taken the high road. I mean, there is, you have, your neshama, your soul is just filled with such sweetness and gentleness, even in retelling the story, that I always wonder how somebody who went through such a thing could have the attitude that you have.
My wife would say his head is going to be...
No. I remember Rozenberg. I remember Rozenberg. Tell me, I'm Amos. How is it that you are you? Is it just within you? There's a lot of people who are bitter, who get angry, who, I mean, you know about Holocaust.
The German with that stick
Yeah.
said to this guy. That's all. That's all.
That you survived.
Yeah.
How did you choose Minnesota?
Oh, I had a friend here before came before me. Like Columbus came before me.
Columbus.
Can't carry around that.
In Sweden.
Does anybody?
I know, because he was pretending. Pretending like he was. I was just saying that I was keeping my head up.
Joe? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
I'm not from America.
Thank you, Joe, for being you. And thank you for all you've done for the family.
Yeah.
And what I want to say at the end of this video thing, and of course, thank you to Stephen and Cheryl, whatever, however that goes, for their wonderful hospitality. I just want to say to anybody who sees this video, and hopefully it'll go on from generation to generation, remember the Holocaust, remember hearing Joe, remember what happened to the family, and make sure you continue to talk about it and help everyone, and help your children to remember what's happened, and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Find the movie.
I'm sorry, what?
How do we find you?
Wasn't that movie so
Valeria.
How are you? You look good in pink.
We're talking about maybe we can figure out some
Great. We're brothers.